Today I'm going to be reviewing and comparing all of Niterider's self-contained bike headlights. I love night riding. It's one of my favorite ways to experience the outdoors on a bike. It adds such a new dimension that you don't get during the day. A trail you've ridden 100 times and have memorized becomes a whole new experience when you ride it at night, if you have the right equipment. So today we're going to be talking about these lights from Niterider and which ones I recommend and what combinations I recommend for different budgets. And this is made possible by competitive cyclists. They are the sponsor for this video today. And all of these products are available at competitivecyclist.com. I'll put a link to them in the description below. And they also have a discount code for those of you to save 15% on your first order with them. Exclusions apply, but I'm really appreciative of them for hooking you guys up. And anything you buy using these links below will help support this channel. So thank you for that. When you go night riding on the single track, on the mountains, you need more than a hiking headlamp. That's not gonna cut it. It doesn't throw enough light. You can't see far enough ahead. I always recommend a mountain bike specific light. Niterider has been doing this for a long time. In the 90s, when I started night riding, I had a Niterider. It had this big battery pack and this big long cord that went up to my helmet. Well, LED lights have come a long way since then, and we now have self-contained units where this is the entire light and battery. So rather than focusing on every single model that Niterider makes, I opted for the highest power for each form factor. So the Swift 500 is the highest power Swift. The Lumina 900 is the highest power Lumina with the smaller body. And the Lumina 1200 OLED is the highest power in this size body. And the Lumina 1800 is pretty unique as well. Some models also have the OLED panel and some don't, so you can save some money if you don't want it. But I wanted to throw one into the mix to see if it was worth the extra cost or if I thought it would be simpler to not have that. Each of these comes with a handlebar clamp mount for them, but none of them come with a helmet strap, and I use the helmet strap the most. So I also have a helmet strap here. It feeds through the little vents on your helmet. And I also have a K-Edge GoPro mount adapter. So this bolts onto the bottom of your light, and you can mount it to any GoPro harness or connector, which really opens up the possibilities. All right, let's get these out of the box and take a quick look at each one. These three are the Lumina series. They all have the same exact sliding rails attachment system, so I can use the head strap for all three of these. The Swift is a little bit different, and it just has a handlebar clamp. These are also big enough to clamp around a 35 mil bar, which is nice. That's what most of my bars are. So these are 1800 lumens, 1200 lumens, 900 lumens, and 500 lumens. The dual 1800 is pretty much two of these 900s in one. And this one does not charge with a USB. It charges with its own dedicated charger. It makes sense because it's got way more power draw and you need to charge a bigger battery, and that will happen faster with this. All of these just charge with a little USB, which makes it super convenient for a little auxiliary power pack, especially when bike packing. Another really important factor you need to think about is how long the battery will last you. You don't want your light running out in the middle of a night ride. On high, this has a claimed 1 hour 40 minutes of battery life. This has a claimed 2 hours of battery life. The 1200 only has a 1 hour battery life at boost. And then the Lumina Dual 1800. So this light, to get the full 1800 lumens, you only get 45 minutes of light output on that. If you step it down to 1500 lumens, you get an hour and a half. So these higher number ones are brighter, but not for longer. So it actually seems like the 900 at the moment is the one to beat, because I can get full 900 lumens for 2 full hours in a small form factor. So I'm gonna take all of these out on the trail, try them in different combinations, headlights, bar combos, all of that, and I'll let you know what my favorites are. Sometimes we're tempted to think that, oh, the most expensive one is gonna be the best because it's the most expensive, but that's not always the case. Even though I've been night riding for a long time, this test taught me so much about lights in my favorite setup. Here we're gonna see the difference between a headlight and a handlebar mounted light. With the headlight, anywhere you turn your head, you've got light. That's really helpful, especially when scanning the trail far ahead or looking through a corner before you get to it. However, you'll notice there's not a lot of definition. It kind of washes the trail out, and I can't see where the bumps are. When we switch to the handlebar light, you can definitely see the bumps. Because the light is lower on the bars and not in line with our eyes, it casts a shadow. And these shadows are super helpful for reading the terrain and knowing what's coming up. The disadvantage to running just a handlebar light is you can't see very far ahead, especially through corners, and that's dangerous. If I had to pick between the two, I would pick the helmet light. I really like being able to see where I'm going. It's just scary with the handlebar light alone. But I think the ideal setup is a combination of both. Because the purpose of the handlebar light is to cast these shadows and show depth, a super bright headlamp negates that effect. So here you can see me turn the light on my head up to full brightness and it washes out those shadows. It kind of erases the effect of the handlebar light. So I like to run a brighter light on the bar so I get the best of both worlds. Another thing I learned to combat this whitewash effect where the headlamp washes out those shadows is to aim the headlamp farther down the trail and aim the handlebar mount closer to the ground in front of you. So my handlebars take the first 30 feet and my headlamp takes the next 30 to 100 feet. This helps me scan the trail ahead. I don't get a lot of definition, but as it gets closer, I see that definition from the handlebar mounted light. That was a really interesting finding. Now we're going to take a look at each light individually. I'm running this camera in manual, so unlike a point and shoot camera or your cell phone that's just going to auto adjust the lighting for everything, the camera settings are fixed, so you can actually see how much brighter each light is than the other one. Here's the Swift 500 on low, on medium, and on high. Here's the Lumina 900 on low, medium, and high. Here's the Lumina 1200 OLED on low, medium, high, and boost. You'll notice that boost isn't a whole lot brighter than high, but it sure drains the battery faster, so I almost always avoid the boost mode unless I'm in the last 10 or 15 minutes of my ride and I just want maximum light. And here is the Lumina Dual 1800 on low, medium, high, and boost. Here you can see the difference of the lens of the 1800. It really casts light everywhere, not just in a focused beam, and that is one of my favorite features of the Dual 1800. Alright, so I've had all of these out on a few rides now, and I'd like to share some of my findings. I learned a ton in this experiment. In the past, I primarily used a headlamp because I wanted to be able to see around corners and see far enough ahead. But I really learned the value of a good handlebar light. And I also learned that a handlebar light should be brighter than your headlight, which I thought was totally counterintuitive. But the handlebar light ends up casting shadows, which is what you need for that depth perception to see how big the rocks coming up really are. So I recommend something bright on the bars and not quite as bright on the helmet. Another thing I learned is that the boost modes don't make a huge noticeable difference to the eye. When you pop them into boost mode, maximum power, it drains the battery a lot faster and you don't see a whole bunch more brightness. So I would actually compare these against their non-boost outputs, which means that the 1200 is really more like 1000 and the 900 is a 900. So I don't see the point in getting the bigger one when this is a lot cheaper for 10% less output. And the 1800 dual is essentially two 900s. But something about the beam pattern is different. I don't know if it's these little side pieces here. I think that might have something to do with it. But it casts a different beam than two 900s. And I thought, well, I'll just get two 900s and never have to worry about this. I actually like the light pattern and the dispersion and everything about this the most. Not a huge surprise. But it doesn't have the battery life of two 900. So that's been kind of interesting. Let's go through each one real quick. I'll share some of my pros and cons of each and then share with you my recommendations. So the pricing comes in at 40 bucks, 75 bucks, 150, 160. This little 500 is actually pretty cool, and it's what I'd get for someone who's commuting on the road or something like that. It's got a built-in mount, super easy to use, but it doesn't convert to a helmet mount, and it doesn't use the same mounts as these other three. It's not in the Lumina series, but I thought I'd include it because it's so cheap. What it does really well is act kind of like a fog light, and it illuminates the ground right in front of you the first 10 feet or so. It doesn't quite have the reach to cast the shadows that we need to get the depth perception, so it doesn't cut the mustard in a serious off-road setup, a multi-light setup for me. The Lumina Micro 900 is the best bang for the buck out of the test, and I would take it over the 1200. The reason is the 1200's really only 1200 on boost, and the battery life on boost is so low it's not even worth considering, I don't think. So this is essentially a 1000. So the difference between the 900 and the 1000 is not big in brightness, but this one's smaller and it's cheaper. So, and it's got a longer runtime. So I will vote for the 900 over the 1200 every time. So going to the 1200, I have mixed feelings about the OLED panel. It's super nice to see your battery life, and it also predicts how much time you can run at that. So if I put it in low, it'll say, 4 hours, 17 minutes. And then I switch to the next mode, it might say 2 hours, 20 minutes, and then I switch to high and it might say 47 minutes. I really like having that. What I do not like about this are, one, all the functions. There's these pages to scroll through. There's just too many options, and the light's too complex. Normally you think options are great, but when you're riding, I just want low, medium, high, maybe a flasher if I'm commuting. Also, the button is really hard to find when it's on your helmet. I was so frustrated when I rode with this as my helmet light because I could never hit the right button, and trying to turn it on and off was a pain. Sounds like a first world problem, but I only recommend the OLED panel on your handlebars. It adds cost to it, so if you really want that feature, I'd put it on a handlebar light, definitely not on a helmet light. There's a product called Sugru. It's kind of like silly putty that dries kind of firm. And what I would do is make a little ball and put it on the power button so that if it were on my helmet, I could feel that. But the buttons don't really have a positive click to them. It just, it's nice to have the screen, but I don't think it's worth it if you like simplicity. If you're the guy who likes to geek out on having every single option possible, this might be the one for you. Now, the Lumina Dual 1800 is an interesting light. It actually surprised me. It felt quite comfortable on the helmet. Even though it's heavy, I didn't feel it being heavy on the helmet, and I've used it as a helmet light. And if you can only have one helmet light and budget is not an option, or you've got this in your budget, I actually really like this. In fact, I like this as much as my $400 Niterider with the external battery pack. It just doesn't have the battery life and length that I need for that. But I really like this, both on the bars and on the helmet. It casts a different beam pattern, as you could see in the pictures. It not only shoots far, but it floods quite a bit, and I feel like a lot of the time when this was on the helmet, the handlebar light didn't really do much because it was so good at illuminating everything. I actually had a hard time getting those shadows to show up. So while I would love one of these on the bars and one on the helmet, if it was on my helmet, I'd just run it on low, maybe medium the whole time, get a heck of a lot of battery life. I definitely recommend getting the helmet strap. You have to have a helmet that has vents that you can push it through. Some of the older Smith helmets had that little honeycomb mesh through them, and you couldn't weave this through at all and run it on there. In that case, I would go to that K-Edge mount and run a GoPro sticky mount on it, but I definitely recommend picking one of these up. So these lights are awesome, and I have converted to the self-contained Lumina series. I'm no longer using my big race one with the big battery pack that I stick in my backpack. These are so convenient. There's no cables, they're lightweight, they're quick to charge, they charge easily with the USB. I don't have to go hunt down a charger for them. It doesn't take 6 hours to charge them. I really like that. So which ones do I recommend? I recommend everyone own a 900. This is like the gold standard for me. You can run it as a helmet light, you can run it as a handlebar light. Excellent longevity with the battery, and it just plain works. It's solid, it's durable. And then I would also get another one of these. So I'd have two of these. I could run one on the bar, one on the helmet. I'd also have one for a buddy, because when you get into night riding, if your friends don't have lights, it's not as fun. Part of the fun aspect of night riding is going with all your buddies. And having two lights lets you lend one to a buddy, or if one dies, you can pull it out. I mean, these are small enough you could have a couple of these, run them on high all the time, and just swap them out through the night, and they're cheap enough. I know what you're thinking, that's not cheap, but it's cheaper than lights used to be, and with how much function you get in this, it's pretty awesome. And then your third light, I would probably get another one of these. That sounds so funny, but I think you could run two of these on the bars and one on the helmet and have one of the most versatile setups. You could, essentially, you kind of have a dual when you get two of these, but you get better battery life with two of these than the dual 1800. The one thing you're missing out on is the beam pattern of the dual 1800. But yeah, you could run two of these on the bars. You could kind of angle them differently too, so you get different depths, different throw distances. One can like light up what's right in front of you, one can shoot a little bit further ahead. I also think redundancy is a good thing. If you've got three little lights, you can, and one's starting to die and you just need to get out of there, one of those three will probably have a low enough battery life that you could, you know, eke it out home on low. Now, if budget was no option, I would have two of these. I'd have one of these on the bars and one of these on the helmets. This is my favorite light when you don't factor in cost. I wish it had better battery life. There's something different about these lenses. I don't know if it's these little clear panels on the side, but even at the same lighting outputs, like when they're both at 500 lumens per se, it throws more light and it fills more. At the cost of battery life. So if you don't want three of these, or you've got the budget for the 900 and the 1800, that's my two light setup that I would go with. I really, really like it, and that's what I'll be running most of the time when I go out. The 1200 I would skip. It just doesn't quite have the benefits over the 900. It has worse battery life on high, and it's bigger and it's more expensive, so I think the 900's better there. So this light is $10 more than the 1200, and it's definitely worth the extra $10. I would much rather have this than this. The OLED panel is nice, but I'd rather have more light output. Now the OLED panel adds 40 bucks to the light, and at that point I'd rather just get another one of these. I know these are more than 40 bucks, but if you had a spare one of these in your backpack and your light ran out and you could pull this out, that would be pretty awesome. Now this light is available without the screen for $109. So pretend this didn't have the screen, that'd be $109 versus $75. I don't think it's worth the difference to get an extra 100 lumens essentially in the boost feature. It's just not something I'm gonna use enough out of that. I'd rather get a couple of these and have redundancy. So if you only had 100 bucks to spend on a light, get the 900. If you've got 150 bucks, what do you get? Two of these or one of these? That's a tough call. I'd get two of these so that I could run one on the bar and one on the helmet and have a little bit of redundancy if one ran out before the other and I had to get home. If you had 160 bucks and you only wanted one light, I would get this because it is so versatile and the beam pattern is wonderful. But it's too scary just on the bars, and if you only run it on the helmet, you'll be okay, you just won't get that added depth perception. That said, I could totally be happy running this on the helmet and do a 3 or 4 hour ride just fine, and I'd be happy with that. If you had a $230 budget, this is where it gets interesting. Would you get three of these or these two? I'd probably get one of these and one of these. If you had a $350 budget, that puts you into the super bright series with the external battery packs. I'd probably get two of these, but that's a lot of money to spend on lights, but that beam pattern is pretty special. I think that'd be overkill, so with my budget and what I would care about, I would get these two or possibly three of these. Three of these had so much versatility. I got an extra light for a buddy. I've got redundancy if one goes out. I could run two on the bars if I felt like I just needed even more shadow depth perception. And I'd also be able to just grab one to run on my helmet when I need something simple. I have done probably 50 night rides with just this on my helmet, and it was just fine. I didn't get that depth perception, but there's something about simplicity, and that's why I love these little Night Rider headlamps. They are simple, they are rugged. If it rains, I don't have to worry about them. They fit in my pockets. They're just great little lights, and I wish I had these when I started mountain biking. This would have opened up a whole bunch of doors and not had to wear all those clunky cables and extra battery packs and all that. This video has been sponsored by Competitive Cyclist. I'm super grateful to them for supporting the channel. I have links to all of these in the description below where you can buy them from competitivecyclist.com. And I have a discount code for those of you shopping your first time there. Restrictions apply, but I'm really appreciative of them for hooking you guys up with the discount code. So get out there and get night riding. I can't recommend it enough. It's super fun. Get your buddies hooked. Usually after 1 or 2 rides with a good light setup, it's not hard to convince your friends. It's really fun. It just adds a really exciting element to mountain biking, and I highly recommend it. Thanks for watching. There's a party in the mountains, and you're invited.